Well, now take down your fishing pole and meet me at the fishing hole. I can't think of a better way to pass the time of day.
RodMob. This is The Splash, your Northern California fishing podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Scott.
And I'm Sarah.
We're coming at you from the RodMob Treehouse here in feeling like fall, Portola Valley. It's Friday, October 5th, and this is episode 29 of The Splash, your weekly Northern California fishing podcast. We've got lots of info packed in today. We're going to talk Pyramid Lake, check in with Dave at Clear Lake Outdoors, the Soul Man out of Fisherman's Wharf, plus we got the latest reports from RodMobbers all over Northern California. But first, let's kick things off with this week's news.
Here's Sarah with the latest headlines.
Well, we've got a few news stories about salmon this week. First off, there was a report that the Feather River Hatchery in Oroville has been killing all salmon that enter the hatchery near the base of Oroville Dam since September 17th. The Department of Fish and Game operates the hatchery and says there's a mixture of fall and spring run Chinook in the Feather River. The Oroville Dam prevents the spring run salmon from going farther upriver, and the two runs wind up mixing for a period of time in the fall, and it's difficult for hatchery managers to tell the two runs apart. Outdated hatchery practices caused partial interbreeding between the two species, which has caused the spring run to arrive later and the fall run to arrive earlier. This body of fish has historically been bred, creating a tweener population with different migratory patterns. The DFG has been getting critiqued for this by academia and conservation groups for quite a while. The report that was published back in June by a scientific panel reviewing California hatchery practices highlighted this problem and recommended eliminating the overlap of the runs. Keeping the runs distinct is important because the species need to be able to adapt to changing environmental conditions, which they can't do if they're weakened by a loss of genetic diversity. So, instead of breeding these salmon like it has in the past, the DFG is following a new protocol and culling them from the population and donating them to area food banks. From September 17th to last week, when the new practice was scheduled to end, they estimated about 7,800 fish had been killed instead of spawned. Fisheries Program Manager Kathy Hill said, if we can get that separation back and have the spring run spawning prior to the fall run, over time this should become less and less needed. The culling is a regular practice elsewhere, but a first for the Feather River Hatchery. Hatchery biologists said that with the high volume of fish in the river this year, they were able to choose the best ones for hatchery production, and they met their goal on the number of eggs. A fisheries spokesperson for the DFG told the Sacramento Bee this week that they were concerned about how they would be perceived by not using the salmon they're culling this year, but it's very clear they need to do everything they can to keep these runs separate. Next, there was a report in the Press Democrat on Tuesday that the first fall run Chinook have begun to return to the Russian River. The first fish was caught on film on September 5th, swimming through the fish ladder at Forestville, and 47 more have been photographed by underwater cameras since then. The peak of the run is from mid-October to mid-November. The Sonoma County Water Agency has been tracking the run with underwater cameras since 2000. And the lowest number they've tracked was 1,125 fish, but in recent years the number has gone up. Last year, 3,119 were counted, and with the great returns being seen in the Sacramento and Klamath rivers, the Water Agency is expecting to see at least 3,000 fish this year, and hopefully more. And the Santa Cruz Sentinel reported yesterday that questions are being raised about the hatchery program located near the mouth of the Santa Cruz Harbor. The program has helped make this season the best in recent years. 240,000 hatchery Chinook were released from the harbor this year, but there are concerns that Chinook returning to the harbor to spawn are making their way to Arana Creek and up the San Lorenzo River, which is the domain of endangered steelhead. Chinook have been spotted in the San Lorenzo River Lagoon area behind the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and far up the river all the way to Ben Lomond and in Zayani Creek. So, just as folks are trying to nurse the steelhead population back to health, the Chinook could eat them. And on top of that, salmon amassing outside the harbor attempting to spawn could attract other marine mammals, which eat steelhead. The fishery program manager for the Department of Fish and Wildlife says they don't believe the Chinook will interfere with the steelhead since they have different life cycles. Chinook leave the rivers almost immediately, while steelhead stay for a year. But federal officials say they just don't know what the impact will be. What happens when it's time for the fish to spawn is still being studied. A local biologist agreed the situation is worth monitoring and will need to be addressed if the salmon continue to make their way into the San Lorenzo River over the next few years.
Stay on top of the latest fishing action. Subscribe to RodMob Podcasts on iTunes. It's free, and you'll always get the latest episodes.
Last week, we reported on a bill that went before the governor to prevent the transfer of crab permits to out-of-state boats. North Coast crab fishermen are celebrating this week. Governor Jerry Brown signed the bill just in time for the season. The governor also signed a bill this week that was supported by Trout Unlimited and CalTrout that'll strengthen programs to protect, restore, and sustain wild trout. Brian Johnson,
lead singer of AC/DC?
No, not that Brian Johnson.
No.
Brian Johnson, Trout Unlimited's California director, posted on the TU blog today about the boost that SB 1148 brings for anglers and wild trout. Brian points out that this new legislation will require all hatchery and wild trout programs that are funded by license fees to be guided by an overall strategic plan and outlines purposes for the plan, including thriving and self-sustaining wild and native trout populations and providing and improving angling opportunities. It also authorizes more staff and funding for the Heritage and Wild Trout program. Today, President Obama signed the Billfish Conservation Act into law, banning importing billfish into the United States. Up until now, the U.S. has been the largest importer of billfish, importing about 30,000 every year. The bill was championed by the International Game Fish Association and the National Coalition for Marine Conservation, and supported by a diverse partnership of angling and conservation organizations. The state of California received $12.7 million in federal grants to support conservation planning and acquiring habitats for endangered fish, wildlife, and plants. There are a variety of projects across the state that were funded. You can check the DFG website to see a full list of the habitats that are included in the recovery plans. Speaking of conservation, the Center for Biological Diversity petitioned the state of California and federal governments to protect the Clear Lake hitch as an endangered species. The hitch is found only in Clear Lake and its tributaries. Clear Lake is the largest body of freshwater located entirely in California and possibly the oldest lake in North America. Some estimates put it at 2.5 million years old. Each spring, adult hitch swim up streams to spawn before returning to Clear Lake. The Center for Biological Diversity claims that millions of them used to jam the lake's tributaries, but now only a few thousand remain. There are concerns that the whole population is vulnerable to water diversion and pumping, drought, and invasive species. If the hitch is declared an endangered species, it could mean some drastic measures. Weed removal could be ordered to stop to increase food sources, meaning no control of invasive weeds. And the petition calls out largemouth bass as predators, taking a heavy toll on the population, and recommends controlling bass populations by encouraging catch and keep instead of catch and release. With up to 500 bass being caught in every Clear Lake tournament every year, the Lake County Record B estimates that would mean about 30,000 adult bass being permanently removed from Clear Lake each year. The Lake County Board of Supervisors discussed the effects on Tuesday, and a council is teaming up with the Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee to offer a public forum for education and input in early November.
When I was talking with Dave at Clear Lake Outdoors today, I asked him about this, and he says they really need to do a study. No one's done a census to count how many hitch are actually in the lake. He sees bass chasing them all over the lake. He commented, too, what a big impact it would have if the hitch were declared an endangered species.
Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/TheRodMob.
And Pyramid Lake made some headlines this week. Monday was the trout opener, and all the reports we're seeing say big cutthroat and plenty of them are being caught. So let's talk a little bit about Pyramid Lake. Scott, this is one of your favorite spots to fish, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. My grandfather had a cabin at Donner Lake in Truckee, California, and I used to fish up there, and I'd hear about this place near Reno where people fished from ladders, and it sounded really cool. So about 10 years ago, I bought a book called No Nonsense Guide to Fly Fishing Pyramid Lake by Terry Barron, packed up my truck, and took my first trip to Pyramid, and I've been hooked ever since.
I saw reports this week that 90% of the cutthroat caught were over 18 inches. That's huge.
Yeah, Pyramid Lakes is known as home of the world's largest cutthroat trout. The trout are huge, plenty of 8 to 15 pounders out there, and they're beautiful. The species there is this Lahatan species that's over 2 million years old.
Wow. So you'd recommend the lake, sounds like.
Yeah, man, if you haven't had a chance, you got to really get out there and give it a try. The surroundings are amazing. The treeless shoreline, and there's these tufa formations that make it look like you're fishing on the moon. And the dynamic weather can make it quite an adventure.
So you said it's near Reno, and it's in Nevada then, right?
Yeah, it's on the Pyramid Lake Paiute Indian Reservation, which is 35 miles north of Reno, about 45 minutes. The lake is fed by the Truckee River out of Lake Tahoe. It's a big lake. It's like 5 miles long, 11 miles wide, 350 feet deep, and the water is 1/6 as salty as seawater.
Don't you need some kind of special permit to fish there? I think I read something about that.
Yeah, because the lake's on the Paiute Indian Reservation. You don't need a Nevada fishing license, but you do need to get a fishing permit that you can get at the lake. Local shops like Gillies and Sparks, and you can even get them online. It'll cost you like $9 a day. There's discounts too for multiple day permits or like a year permit. There's regulations you got to know about too. The trout season runs from October to end of June. There's a slot limit. You can keep 2 fish between 17 and 20 inches and over 24 inches. It's a barbless only lake. No bait or scents are allowed. 1 stringer per fisherman. You can't fillet your fish on the reservation. There's no fishing from the docks, and you need to report all your fishing results, good or bad, to the Creel Consensus Station as you exit the reservation.
I think we've got a picture up on our site of you fishing Pyramid Lake on a ladder. You mentioned the ladders before. What's the deal with the ladders?
Well, the key to fishing Pyramid is getting your fly out to the ledges and drop-offs where the fish are. So anglers use different methods of elevating themselves to get a deeper presentation. Also keeps your body out of the cold all day. Most folks use step ladders, 6-foot A-frame ladders, or milk crates. I've even seen guys out there with custom rolling fishing platforms with lazy boy chairs mounted on the top of them.
No way.
Yeah, it's true. But I prefer a 6-foot A-frame ladder, but it can cause for some painful shins. So what you do is you wade out as far as you can go before your waders start to fill with water. And then you plant your ladder steady in the mud and be sure that the ladder's solid and even in the mud, or you might find yourself taking a swim.
I think I would fall off.
Well, I've taken a few unfortunate dives there because one side of my ladder sank into the mud, and that's why I recommend wearing a wading belt. Another tip is you'll want to tether a float to your ladder so you can find it if it tips over from the waves or is below the surface like a step ladder. Popular devices I see guys using are duck decoys and milk jugs. I use a small boat bumper. I also attach my net to the ladder with a rope.
So what kind of setup do you suggest?
Your typical 6-weight trout rod ain't going to cut it at Pyramid. You're going to want to go with an 8.5 to 10-foot 7 or 8-weight rod to deal with the fast sinking shooting head line in the wind. You don't need to be an expert fly fisher to have success at Pyramid. It's pretty easy fishing. You just got to get it out there. You don't have to match the hatch or read the water or anything. You just chuck it, sink it, and strip it. The most popular technique you see is guys casting black and purple woolly worms out as far as you can. They let them sink to the bottom and strip them in. And the cutthroats don't seem to be that leader shy. And they do have sharp teeth, so you want to go with something like 2X or 3X tippet. Some anglers add a second bugger or a foam beetle. Another technique is using midges and nymphs on a floating line with a floating indicator. You can get flies and info for Pyramid at the Gillies Fishing Store in Sparks on your way in. And there's a few shops in the Bay Area that have stuff for Pyramid, like the California Fly Shop and Fish First. Also, plenty of fish are caught there by anglers using spinning gear and trolling gear too, but I've never tried it. I've even seen guys out there in float tubes, which I think is pretty crazy because of the weather. I sure wouldn't do it. I've seen waves out there you could surf on.
Wow. Well, recommendations on where and when to fish?
Popular spots are the Nets, Wino Beach, Pelican Point, Warrior Point, and the Willows. The largest beach on the lake is the South Nets. It's the most popular and most crowded beach too. The fishing at Pyramid is very social, and it's very common to see a bunch of anglers lined up no more than 20 feet away from each other working a spot. Yeah, but it's a huge lake, and if that's not your cup of tea to stand that close to other guys, you can always go find your own spot. The trout fishing is best in April, October, and November. It's closed in July, August, and September. The Sacramento perch fishing is open all year round there. And you can access most of the shoreline in your vehicle. You can literally park right on the beach. There are soft spots, so be careful and don't get stuck in the sand.
Okay, so you keep mentioning this dynamic weather. What does that mean?
The weather there is nuts. It changes like every minute, it seems like it. So you're going to want to dress in layers and be prepared for extreme cold too. In my case, I bring an extra pair of clothes for when I fall off my ladder. And there are times where I had to get off the lake and literally just wait out the wind in my car. It was just too windy to even be outside. And you get like sandblasted.
Wow.
And the lake's really salty and it could really chap your hands. So you're going to want to bring some hand lotion for the end of the day. And I met a couple there on one trip that recommended wearing like rubber doctor gloves.
Well, it sounds like a really unique place.
It sure is. I highly recommend it. I'll post some links and more info on our website for you folks to check out.
Awesome. And the season's open now. It sounds like it's off to a great start. Well, that's it for the headlines. Now for some tight lines. Here are the latest reports on the best Northern California fishing. Let's start with the saltwater. On the North Coast, rough weather due to storms out of Alaska has made ocean conditions tough. Last Thursday, Tim Clausen of the Real Steel brought in 36 quality snappers and 6 lingcod fishing Cape Mendocino. And the Press-Democrat reports only a handful of small halibut caught out of Eureka last Thursday, but the rockfish and cabezon fishing off local piers and jetties has been consistent. Rough waters in the Fort Bragg area, too. The good word we're hearing here has been mostly for spearfishers targeting big rockfish, cabezon, and keeper lingcod. Bodega Bay boats are still finding albacore 30-plus miles out. Salmon are still biting off Bird and Elephant Rock and also off 10 Mile Beach. The great rock fishing continues and plenty of limits have been reported.
Outside the gate, boats heading to the Fairlawns found plenty of rockfish, lingcod, and sand dabs. And another 10 miles past the islands, the hot tuna bite continued. Boats fishing out at the Gumdrop continued to fill their boats with tuna. On Tuesday, the new Salmon Queen at Emeryville reported 55 albacore, and Duxbury and Muir Beach were productive for salmon. On Wednesday, Hog Heaven Sport Fishing had limits of salmon at 27 pounds for 8 anglers and a 41-pound white sea bass. Yesterday, they reported 15 salmon to 22 pounds for 10 anglers. New Easy Rider Sport Fishing ended the day today with 16 salmon to 26 pounds for 10 anglers. Today, we had a chance to check in with Captain Don Franklin, who runs Soulman Sport Fishing out of Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco.
Fishing has been really good. It's the best time of the year, the biggest fish, and the best weather that we have on our coast. We're about a solid fish to a rod, and many days we're getting limits.
So where are you fishing?
Marin Coast, near coastal, anywhere from the channel buoys out west up to Duxbury Reef, the towers, the buoys, and anywhere that you mark bait, all in between there because the fish are staging for their normal fall run to go up the rivers.
If someone wants to book a trip, how should they reach you?
The soul phone is 510-703-4148.
Well, cool, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
There's red-hot albacore action 30 miles out of Half Moon Bay. Now's the time to get out there. Good rock fishing continues for boaters and anglers fishing the jetty and breakwater walls. Some salmon are still being taken up the road off the pier in Pacifica.
Boats out of Santa Cruz continue to target rockfish and tuna, depending on conditions. The salmon were biting this week in the harbor near Capitola, Black Point, Pleasure Point, and the Mile Buoy. On Thursday, Bayside Marine reported nice-sized kings to 36 pounds. Sea bass are being caught from 3 Mile to 5 Mile Beach and Wilder Beach. RodMobber Michael Nelson sent us a report that he got his limit of lingcod and rockcod today, fishing with stagnaros out of Santa Cruz. In Monterey, Chris's Fishing and Whale Watching had limits of rockcod on Tuesday and Wednesday on the Checkmate, and the Star of Monterey headed to Big Sur on Wednesday for limits of rockcod and 25 lings for 19 anglers. Today, the Star of Monterey dropped in Carmel Bay and brought in limits of rockcod again, and 31 lings for 24 anglers. Chris's is taking reservations for rockcod and Dungeness crab combo trips. To book your seat, give them a call at 831-375-5951. Inside the bay, the striper bite is on. Great reports are coming in from all around. There's action in Oyster Point, San Pablo Bay, Sassoon Bay, the Carquinez Straits, and out at the Mothball Fleet. And both the Napa and Petaluma rivers are reporting wide-open bites. But RodMobber Jeremy Smith reported in that he fished the Lakeville section of the Petaluma River on Saturday afternoon and evening and found nothing but undersized ones. Jeremy says, saw good tides for the mouth of the Petaluma River, Black Point, here now, running chovies and mudsuckers thanks to Leonard's Bait in Port Sonoma. Sturgeon have been reported at Martinez, the Napa River, and the Carquinez Straits, and anglers are still finding shark in the South Bay.
On the Delta, the hot striper bite continues. It's pretty much lights out from Benicia to Tracy. RodMobber Charles Johnson reported in this week after fishing for stripers near Rio Vista. He went out with 2 other anglers and found plenty of keeper-sized fish. The warm weather is forcing the salmon up the river, but they're out there. The sturgeon bite is picking up. Reports of keepers came from Honker Bay and Chain Island. Now let's take a look at the lakes. Good fishing continues at Lake Shasta. Trout are biting 40 to 70 feet on trolled wiggle hoochies, apex, and shad patterns. Salmon are hitting rolled anchovies to 100 feet. Bass fishing has also been good in the McLeod Arm and throughout the lake using plastics and topwater gear. Tim Good reports excellent trolling action for trout at Lewiston Lake. Limits can be caught in less than 2 hours. Dodger crawlers without added weight get quality trout to 18 inches. Fly fishers go to Ackerman and use woolly buggers and green midges. Purple woolly buggers work from the marina shoreline. We spoke with Dave at Clear Lake Outdoors today. Here's that report. So Dave, how's it been going?
Well, a lot of guys are struggling, but some guys are doing really good. Swim bait bite's been pretty good first thing in the morning. Topwater bite's picking up a little bit after the full moon. It's picking up quite a bit this week. The best bet, as far as I'm concerned, is the LV500 out there.
And how about any hot spots to target?
Mid-Lake seems like the consensus. The guys are doing the best around Buckingham Point in that area.
How's the catfish bite?
Catfish bite's always good this time of year up here. You can go out with jumbo minnows or mackerel and everything and do pretty good with the catfish, and it's not uncommon to catch a 15 to 20-pound channel cat here.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
All right, man, thanks for the update.
No problem.
All right, take it easy.
Okay, thanks.
You can reach the guys at Clear Lake Outdoors at 707-262-5852. Cooler weather is heating up the bass bite at Lake Berryessa. Bust out reaction baits and cover a lot of water. The fall bite at Lake Oroville is picking up. The topwater bass action is great right now, and it should continue for another month or so.
In the East Bay area, trout are biting again at San Pablo. Anglers trolling broken-back fire tigers near the rec area and dam are having success, as well as shore anglers using chartreuse and spring green power bait. Bass are hitting on spinners and swim baits, and catfish have been biting on anchovies and chicken livers. There's good crappie and bluegill action out near the boat launch area using jigs and redworms. Weekly trout plants continue, but a heads up that San Pablo is closing now at 6 p.m. instead of 7:30, so be aware. There's another trout plant coming to Lafayette Reservoir this week. Hopefully the trout bite will pick up soon. The only reports we're seeing is for catfish. The staff at Lake Del Valle report that the stripers are picking up. They're hitting on anchovies and on some jigs. The black bass are biting on jigs, topwater poppers, spooks, and pencil poppers. Del Valle got 1,000 pounds of trout planted last week, and more are on the way, but the heat has been slowing the bite. There's a good catfish bite at Shadow Cliffs. A recent reported whopper weighed in at 12 pounds. Bass fishing is picking up, and 500 pounds of trout were planted last week, and another 500 are coming this week.
And in the Motherlode area, at New Melones, Melanie Lewis of Glory Hole Sporting Goods reports bass fishing is good with spotted bass ambushing balls of shad along the main lake and in the main lake pockets. She suggests using topwater lures in the morning before switching to jerk baits and flukes by mid-morning. Some largemouth bass can be found in the shallows in the morning before moving out from 25 to 45 feet deep later in the day. Catfishing is excellent on frozen shad, mackerel, wads of night crawlers, chicken livers, and anchovies. Crappie anglers using submersible lights in the backs of coves are catching some nice crappie at night. Multiple trout plants have turned on the bite at McSwain Reservoir. Anglers are finding limits throughout the lake. RodMobber Darren Jimenez Sr. hit the lake last weekend and caught 4 nice trout. Darren was testing out the waters for this weekend's Fall Trout Derby.
In the eastern Sierras, Crowley Lake is Jekyll and Hyde these days, reports SierraDrifters.com. Tom says you get them one day, the next is a battle. On Tuesday, Tom reported slow in the North Arm today, nice water and near perfect conditions. Tubes doing okay along 6 bays. Moved to McGee and found good water and some biters in 7 feet. Check out Sierra Drifters Guide Service on Facebook for more updates from Tom. At June Lake, the trout fishing remains steady. Anglers are getting limits on night crawlers and dough bait combos. Trout are still on the bite at Convict Lake. The best action is the middle to east shore and south shore using Thomas Buoyant perch, night crawlers, and power bait. The Virginias continue to fish well. Ken's Sporting Goods reports fly anglers are using seal buggers, woolly buggers, soft hackles, stillwater nymphs, zug bugs, and princes. Bait anglers are having success with power bait, power eggs, and crawlers. And lure anglers are going with Castmasters, Hot Shots, and Thomas Buoyants. And Shaver Lake is still kicking out limits of trout for trollers working the island in Eagle Point. Shore anglers are also hooking them on power bait and night crawlers.
On the rivers, we're hearing good reports regarding steelhead fishing coming out of the lower Klamath near Happy Camp. Salmon fishing improved a bit, but still was a challenge with good fishing one day and poor the next. Good salmon fishing continues on the Trinity. It's crowded, but anglers are still seeing limits of bright kings with darker fish thrown in. The Pitt River has been fishing well, reports Western Outdoor News, especially sections 3 and 4, and there are some hatches going off. The Fly Shop in Redding reports that the fishing is starting to pick up on Hat Creek. The Powerhouse No. 2 Riffle has been fishing consistently all day with best results in the AM and near sunset hours. Insect hatches are more active and should continue through October. The morning hatches consist of BWOs at or near sunrise, then caddis come off near 10 p.m. Midges are a big part of the Hat Creek Rainbow's diet. Rising fish can be found in the flats below the Powerhouse Riffle when the sun is low. Bring 7X if you hope to fool these crafty rainbows.
The word on Sacramento River king salmon is limits, and lots of bright fish are reportedly moving upstream. NorCal Fishing News reports almost every hole from Colusa to Red Bluff is holding salmon. Upstream in the barge hole, expect a dozen boats to be circling, but limits are the rule here too. RodMobber John Politis caught a nice king on a spinner fishing the upper Sac on Saturday. Not a chromer, but great on the smoker. And Scott Feist at Feisty Fish Guide Service has put his clients on limits of kings every day this week. Scott reported today and yesterday were both solid days with limits well before noon. Scott's catching them on plugs and Potski cured roe. To get in on the action, go to Scott's site at feistyfish.net. In the Sacramento area, RodMobber Ja Vang continues to tear it up on the Sacramento River. He caught another bright, nice-sized king on Sunday.
We want to hear from you. Got a fishing report, a tip, a review, a comment on the show? Drop us a message on the RodMob hotline. Then listen for it on an upcoming episode. 662-RODMOB5.
Salmon fishing on the Feather River was great again below the outlet, reports Western Outdoor News, but the fish are almost all dark. Fewer but brighter fish were being caught around Yuba City. Be aware that the river closes to fishing from the unimproved boat ramp above the outlet down to a point 200 yards above the Live Oak boat ramp on October 15th. The rest of the main stem of the Feather will remain open to salmon fishing until December 16th. Steelhead fishing's been very good around Gridley and in the low flow section. And RodMobber Charles Knott reported in on Saturday saying he fished the lower Yuba River next to Marysville. Charles said the river looks great, nice and clear. It's a little warm, but is cooling. He didn't catch any steelhead, but saw one chasing some bait fish, and Charles says it won't be long before some fish move up.
Fly fishing is good on the Truckee. Guide Matt Coles of Gilligan's Guide Service posted a new Truckee River report today and says, the heat wave continues, but fall weather is in the forecast. This should mean blue wings, October caddis, and streamer fishing. It will be nice to get some rain and move some fish around, but the cool weather will help. It just seems that we haven't had any fall weather yet. The water is a little skinny up along Glenshire, but is still pretty perfect down here in Hirschdale and below. East of Reno, the water is around 350 cubes, perfect too. Fish are still in summertime type water, but that will change quickly with some cool weather. There's no excuses. Now's the time to get up to the Truckee River and get into some fall action. And fall has begun in the eastern Sierras, and Sierra's Drifters Guide Service reports fly fishing the upper Owens, East Walker, and lower Owens is getting good. Good trout action continues on both forks of the Carson River. Last week, 1,800 pounds of trout were planted, and another 500 pounds of trout are coming this week.
Woo! Fish! Woo! All right!
Catch of the week.
Well, this is one of those weeks where it's tough to pick from all the great catches the RodMob is posting on our Facebook page. But this week, our podcast artwork is courtesy of Debbie Hogan. Debbie posted this shot of Ben Creamer and his fishing friends who went out on Bodega Bay in Ben's boat, the Oh Glory, and landed some real beautiful salmon. Thanks, Debbie, for posting this week's Catch of the Week.
Okay, it's poll question time.
All right, well, last week we talked about a survey from the National Wildlife Federation, and one of their questions focused on access to public lands. So we put the same question to you. In the past year, has your access to quality places to fish increased, decreased, or stayed the same? Well, 7 of you said your access has increased, but the majority, 64%, said it's decreased. 28% said it's stayed the same. All right, ready for this week's question?
I'm ready.
The 2012 salmon season's starting to wind down. We want to know your take on how the season's been for you. Is it lousy, just couldn't get the skunk off, good, not great, pretty wide open, but I've had better, or the best season ever? Head over to RodMob.com to cast your vote.
We've teamed up with Military Hunting and Fishing and other partners to celebrate Thanksgiving with a blowout giveaway. 4 prize packages worth over $600. The giveaway runs now to Thursday, November 22nd. We'll announce the winners on Thanksgiving Day. To enter and see prizes, go to RodMob.com and click Turkey Day Giveaway. Or head on over to our Facebook page and click on the Giveaway tab. You can enter multiple times to increase your chances of winning. Good luck and gobble, gobble, gobble.
Upcoming events you won't want to miss. Here's the RodMob calendar.
This weekend in San Francisco, you can catch Fleet Week activities and the Blue Angels. Several boats in the Golden Gate Fleet are running salmon and Blue Angels viewing combo trips. This Sunday, October 7th, is the last day of recreational ocean salmon season south of Pigeon Point. The season continues to November 11th for the area between Pigeon Point and Point Arena near Fort Bragg. And Sunday is the City of Stockton's second annual Steelhead Festival from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the University of Pacific Campus DeRosa Student Center and Quad. There will be a film festival, fly casting, music, and more. Next week's big event is the 65th annual Rio Vista Chamber of Commerce Striped Bass Derby and Festival. The Derby kicks off Friday, October 12th at 9 a.m. and runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There will also be a carnival, fishing boat raffle, car show, soapbox derby, parade, and we'll be there covering the event. We'll bring a full report on our next show. You can go to bassfestival.org for more info. Also next weekend, on Saturday, October 13th, is the Future Pro Lake McClure Bass Tournament. And the Bureau of Reclamation's Central California Area Office is hosting a Cast for Kids fishing event from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Lake Berryessa's Pleasure Cove Marina on October 13th. On October 15th, Chinook salmon fishing closes on sections of the McCollumney, American, and Feather. Check out www.dfg.ca.gov for specifics. And the Los Vaqueros Marina and Boat Rentals reopens on Monday, October 15th. Next Thursday, the 18th, Roger George is giving a seminar on striped bass downriggers multi-rig umbrella setups at the Fisherman's Warehouse in Fresno at 6 p.m. Also that night at the Fisherman's Warehouse in Manteca, Barry Canavero of Fish Hookers Sport Fishing is giving a seminar on striped bass and sturgeon bait fishing techniques. Saturday, October 20th is the 22nd annual Return of the Salmon Festival, sponsored by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's taking place from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in Anderson, California. And the California Fly Shop in San Carlos is doing a Stillwater Striper Tailgate Talk on Saturday, October 20th at 10:30 a.m. And finally, Bass Pro Ish Monroe is giving a seminar on crankbait techniques on October 25th at the Fisherman's Warehouse in Manteca at 6 p.m. For details on these and other upcoming events, check out our events page at rodmob.com.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for another great week of reports and pictures. Don't forget, we'll send you a free RodMob decal just for sharing your latest catch or report. You can post to our Facebook page or shoot us an email at fishon@rodmob.com.
And if you're going to be at the Striper Derby and Festival in Rio Vista next weekend, be sure to drop by our booth and say hi and enter our raffle for a free t-shirt.
Thanks for listening. Have a great week. And until next time, keep us posted.
RodMob.
at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk in the warm California sun. Boardwalk.